Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I have some very exciting news for the people who watch very, very closely. Behind me, I have new baseball cards behind me. My buddy Michael, who is a longtime viewer of the pod, also a photographer on the beat, watches the show, and we started talking about baseball cards because he saw I had an old sheet of 1985 tops behind me, and he said, "Do you have a favorite set?" And I said, "I always loved the '87 tops with the wood
The
grains."
wood.
And he's like, "Let me see what I can do. Let me see what I can do." And found a nice new sheet of 1987 tops. So I have brand new baseball cards behind me. And if you're anything like me, you went through that set often enough that you can, like, without even squinting, just kind of like see the general outlines and be like, oh yeah, that's a Juan Samuel. Oh yeah, that's a
Mike
Keith
Marshall.
Hernandez. Yeah, Mike Marshall. Yeah, yeah, yep. So thank you to Michael for updating my look on the set here.
I love it. The 87 was a fun one. I also had the mini 87s, which were
Mm-hmm.
like 2x1
Mm-hmm.
or so of some of the star players. A fantastic look back in the day. I did notice that. I wasn't sure if it was because the camera had widened out or something, but nice. Honestly, that's probably a summer show. Favorite baseball card years and baseball card backs and baseball card errors on the butts of bats. But for now, let's talk about other errors, I guess. And specifically, let's start with the decommitment of Chicago five-star defensive tackle Justin Scott. Happened on Wednesday and sort of comes out of the blue, but this is the time of year when things are happening. We are now 3 weeks away. Yeah, 3 weeks away yesterday on Wednesday from the early signing day. And there's quite a bit to talk about with this Justin Scott thing. I think the first thing that struck me with the edit from Hayes Fawcett of the Justin Scott commitment to Miami was just a big pile of money on one part of this beach theme that he's got. And I tweeted that out and I was like, boy, college football is crazy. And people are responding. The crazy part is that they have the CFP championship trophy in that same graphic. And it's like, oh yeah, that is actually the most ludicrous part in all of this. So um, I'll just go really quickly into my thing that I've said for years. And I went back on Twitter to see how long ago I've said this. This is not a recent sour grapes type of thing. My long held belief is once a player chooses Miami, then they no longer exist. They are no longer relevant in the college football world in terms of if you pay attention to Ohio State football, you pay attention to Alabama football or Georgia football. They're not going to come into your field of vision ever again, basically. And also that if you are choosing Miami or you're choosing a USC, like if you're choosing something for the scene, then football isn't the most serious thing in your life. And not that it needs to be for all of these people, all of these players, but it's not serious enough. And when you're choosing the scene or when you're choosing the Miami bag, if you will, that that tells me quite a bit. Because there are other places to go to get a bag where you can also win. And when you choose the Miami money or you choose Miami and no money, because my thought process predates NIL. It's basically if you're going to Miami, you're going to Miami to be at Miami. You're not going to Miami to do anything else. And so certainly not changing that opinion now, but good get for Miami. You do have to build from the line of scrimmage, and they're doing that. So we'll see how it goes there. But I'm not going to change my pretty fairly proven thesis and theory on Miami and what comes from going there.
Well, I think you want to look at just, if people do things, oh, this is sour grapes. I mean, first of all, I can assure you, Tony has been saying this for literally years in lots of cases where it did not involve any in Ohio State in any direct sort of way. Let's play a little game with the audience, Tony.
Hmm.
We're gonna have a quiz. What is the last time Miami won a conference championship, even a share of a conference championship? When is the last time that happened? Everyone take a second, two, think back. Such a storied franchise, so much fog, so many people holding up their hands in a U shape, so many great players over the years. When was the last time they won a conference championship? Tony, do you know the answer, or would you like to take a guess?
Well, I will take a guess because I do not know the answer. And I'm just trying to figure out when the Big East ceased to exist. And I think it still existed in 2006 and 2007. So I will say 2005.
Wrong. 2003. 2003, they were the co-champions. 2003. Now, of course, when Miami jumped over to the ACC, they split up divisions so that Florida State and Miami would be in opposite divisions, because that way you could have a Florida State versus Miami ACC championship every single year. And oh boy, what a TV draw that would be. Well, first of all, I regret to inform you that in the whatever it's been 15, 18 years since that happened, Florida State and Miami have never met in the conference championship game. Now, Florida State has held up their part of the bargain a decent amount. Tony, would you like to guess how many times Miami has won the division, Miami in the Coastal Division, which is the one that is famously full of really crappy middling teams? So in a division full of crappy middling teams, Tony, would you like to guess how many times Miami has won that Coastal Division and appeared in the ACC championship game?
And we're talking 15 or 16 years. Is that correct?
At least, so, yeah. Let's say 2006, 2007, something like that.
Yeah, okay. And given the history of Miami football, one of the great programs of all time, just constant winning, you would think in the 17 opportunities, probably at least 8 or 9, but I'm going to say, Tom, 1.
The answer is, in fact, 1. 2017, they played Clemson in the ACC championship game. Tony, in the long and storied history of Miami football, would you like to guess how many points Miami has scored in the ACC championship game?
Well, we know Miami is the cradle of quarterbacks, the cradle of coaches, although that's a different Miami. Plenty of offensive firepower, defensive talent. Surely, Tom, at least 1 touchdown?
3 points.
Oh.
They lost 38-3 to Clemson in the 2017 ACC title game. Tony, let's talk bowl games. We talked about the fact that the last time the Miami Hurricanes won a conference championship, a share of a conference championship, was 2003. In 2004, they played in 2003, they won the Orange Bowl against Florida State 16-14. In 2004, the 2004 season, they played in the Peach Bowl, which was not really a major bowl game back then, but we're going to give it to them. Since that 2004 Peach Bowl, December 3rd, 31st, 2004, they beat Florida 27-10. How many bowl games has Miami won since that game in 2004, end of the 2004 season?
So we're talking basically 19 seasons. How many bowl games have they won in those 19 seasons? Oh, you got to figure at least half, Tom, and they probably make a bowl game in 90% of their seasons. So of those 19 seasons, there should be at least 8, 9 wins there.
Okay, and before I answer that question, I'd like you to tell me how many power conference teams they've beaten in all of those bowl games they've appeared in since the year of our Lord, 2004.
Well, when did the New Year's Six Bowl start? When did the CFP start? And those still count as well. But Miami has not been in any of that. 11.
Well, Tony, I'm going to start with 2016 in the Russell Athletic Bowl. Miami beat West Virginia 31-14. End of list. They also, in the 2006 MPC Computers Bowl, beat Nevada 21-20. End of list of all of their bowl wins since 2004. Tony, would you like it? NFLU, Miami University, 2 first-round picks in 2021, the last time they had first-round picks. Would you like to guess how many other first-round picks they've had since David Njoku went number 1 to the Browns in the first round to the Browns in 2017 as the 29th overall pick? you like to guess?
How many have they had since between?
Yes, they had 2 in 21,
Hmm.
2 in 2021. How many others since 2017? Any position at all? Any position at all?
Well, now you're giving me any position, and this is a football factory that produces NFL players like Pez produces candy. I'm going to say, so that's 18, 19, and 23 years, an average of 6 first-rounders a year. I will say, Tom, 18 first-round picks in those 3 seasons.
Very, very close. We're going to round down from 18 to 0. Other than those 2, yes. And last defensive tackle to go number 1 out of Miami, Vince Wilfork, who, I mean, boy, that was only 19 years ago. So, yeah. So when we say, when Tony has his long-held theory that if you go to Miami, it's great because then you basically, it's like falling down the Springfield mystery spot and we will never see you again. That's why. That's why. That's why there's money on the graphics, because no one knows what the MPC Computers Bowl trophy looks like. So that's why they put the money on the graphic.
Well, and the quarterback for that Miami team, former number 1 overall recruit Kyle Wright. People might remember from such things as being the number 1 former overall recruit. And right into that, and this was something I tweeted out last year, or this past April. So the last Miami quarterback to be drafted is, they've had one since Ken Dorsey. So that was 2003. They've had one over the last 20 years drafted. It may have been Kyle Wright. I don't know. Tyler Van Dyke, I believe, just hit the portal. So this has not been a great stretch of 20 years since Jim Tressel put the hammer on Miami and basically ended them. I don't know if this is the Montezuma's revenge of this is what Ibis's revenge, and you start losing recruits and commits and decommits and other guys that you want to Miami. That's kind of a slow way of doing it. I don't know if it's going to be effective enough. Sure, it helps Miami and it hurts Ohio State, but you're going to need a lot more than some 5-star defensive tackles to undo the damage that Jim Tressel and the Ohio State Buckeyes have done to Miami over, you can't even say over the years, over the decades, Tom.
Yep, Miami is just like a walking fun fact, because it's like, that can't possibly be right. And you look it up, and that was, I literally was not planning on doing any of this, and I looked up one of those things. I'm like, that can't be right. And then I looked up another thing. I'm like, that can't be right. And that gives you the last 10 minutes or so of this show was just, hey, that can't be right. Hey, Tony, remember earlier in the fall when all they had to do was kneel the ball out and they would have won and they would have beaten Georgia Tech? Ooh, yeah. Yeah, Miami football fans really got on me back about 20 years ago about a column I wrote after the Fiesta Bowl, and it's been going great for them ever since. So, who's to say? Who's to say who was right and wrong back then?
Tom, if you got the list of bowl games there and you want to take a look at the 2019 Independence Bowl, the Miami Hurricanes getting shut out 14-0 to Louisiana Tech.
Yes, I remember that one. We were 2019, so that would have been like the first night we were out at the Fiesta Bowl that year. And that was on in the media lounge or something like that. Yeah, and they haven't played in a bowl game since 2020. You go back and it's Cheez-It Bowl, Independence Bowl, Pinstripe Bowl, Orange Bowl, they lost to Wisconsin, Russell Athletic Bowl, Sun Bowl, Independence Bowl, Russell Athletic Bowl, Sun Bowl, Champ Sports Bowl, Emerald Bowl, MPC Computers Bowl, and now you're back to 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, if you built a time machine and went back to the late 90s and told yourself either that you read off that list of bowl games for Miami, or told yourself Nebraska was going to go on like a 6-year bowlless streak, I don't know which one would have been less believable, but I think probably the Miami one, because they are still literally located in South Florida. Like, you have an incredible amount of talent. Like, it takes an unbelievable amount of institutional bumbling to screw that up, and to screw it up for 2 decades is honestly genuinely impressive.
Yeah, now you got me looking at Nebraska's bowl game history, and this is it goes dark pretty quickly, because you've got Orange Fiesta, Rose, Cotton, Gator, then some Holiday Bowls, and Capital One. That's all perfectly fine. Gator, Holiday, And then Foster Farms, Music City, nothing after 2016. But, as long as they keep their grades up and they stay at 5 and 7, eventually, Tom, they are going to get one of those extra spots like Minnesota got this year. Now, and really, when Minnesota has better academics, better APR than you should be ashamed.
The N on the helmets famously stands for knowledge, but the M on the Minnesota helmets stands for more knowledge. So, therefore, they get outranked.
So now it's like, this is a decommitment. The commitment of Justin Scott came sort of as a surprise. They were obviously involved in him, but when it happened, it was like, whoa, hey, Justin Scott just committed. So I guess we shouldn't be super surprised by the decommitment. Looking at past decommitments, Ohio State has decommitments every single year. They don't necessarily have them every year on the defensive line. And I put a list together, and I threw Deshaun McCullough in there, and he wasn't really a defensive lineman at all when he was being recruited. He was just an athlete who was going to end up somewhere. But Tunmise Adelier in 2021, who ended up at Florida and then Michigan State and then has been dismissed by Michigan State in 2021. Brenton Cox and Andrew Chatfield in 2018, and Terrell Lewis, i.e. Terrell Hall, in 2016. And really, that's been it under Larry Johnson. And that's been fine for years, but it's not the decommitments that are hurting them over the past few years. It hurts them right now, but it's leading for guys, feeling really good about guys, and then seeing those guys go to other schools the last 2 years with the defensive ends, and 2 years prior to this year, and also this year. So go ahead and throw the last 3 years, I guess, if you want, in terms of the defensive ends that you feel good about, but go elsewhere. And if you just land 2/3 of those guys, you're feeling a lot better about possibly losing JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer this year. But I think it's 3 different things, and they're all valid. It's the negative recruiting in terms of Larry Johnson's age and how much longer he's going to be around. It's the fact that Larry Johnson is an older coach, and how much longer is he going to be around? So the negative recruiting is factual recruiting in that sense. And then also NIL is a huge reality in all of this. And as I said before, some programs have to pay a lot to kind of build. Ohio State isn't necessarily in that situation, which frustrates people. When your collective has the money, in theory, there's money around that, you won't match what a Texas A&M or a Miami or a USC or a Texas will do. And so you don't even bother getting involved in them. But those 3 things are going to continue to impact the defensive line recruiting at Ohio State until something is done. And it feels like, I don't know if this was the last straw, but there aren't many more straws that can be put on this camel, if you will.
Yeah, it does feel like at some point Larry Johnson is not going to coach forever. That is not how, anything works. And, there have been rumors back when Joey Bosa was a recruit at Ohio State, I think it were at least Nick Bosa. How much longer can Larry Johnson possibly coach was sort of one of the recurring storylines of his thing. And boy, will he be around for, the end of Joey Bosa's career? Will he be around for the end of Nick Bosa's career? Will he be around for the end of Chase Young's career? Will he be around for the end of Zach Harrison's career? Will he be around for the end of JT Tuimoloau's career? And, Tuimoloau is draft eligible this year. We'll see if he ends up turning pro or not. But, Larry Johnson has been there for 3 years of his career. And, they have had a couple classes in a row where they haven't gotten the 5-star guys. Last year, there were 3 guys who were in the top 50 nationally, top 6 overall at the edge position that Ohio State was considered to be in decent shape or good shape for at various times. Keon Keeley, he ended up going to Alabama. Damon Wilson, he ended up going to Georgia. Mateo Uiagalelei, he ended up going to Oregon, and they ended up going 0 for 3. And now, you lose Justin Scott. They missed out on Marquise Lightfoot, who also went to Miami, and there was some talk that maybe Ohio State could flip him, and that has not happened yet. And you keeping Larry Johnson around is based on reputation, based on his history, and based on the fact that he brings in guys that you don't have to just. This is not Texas A&M where you're just like throwing a bag at people. Like, guys come because he's the guy who coached the Bosas and he's the guy who coached Chase Young. the production hasn't really been there from the defensive line for the last couple of years, and the recruiting hasn't really been there for the defensive line in the last couple of years. And, you do wonder, I think there's been, some questions about exactly how well he meshes with Jim Knowles and what Jim Knowles wants to do on defense, and how well what Larry Johnson does on the defensive line meshes with what Jim Knowles wants to do. And is there enough flexibility there? And, I think there's probably going to be a lot of examination. If Ohio State does miss the playoffs this year, then this will be 3 years in a row where they didn't beat Michigan, didn't win the Big Ten, didn't win the national championship. And I think there's probably time for some self-examination. And is this the time to make some kind of a change there? And even if it's just a small change in role and someone younger comes in and he stays on in some other role, like whatever, that's fine. But it does feel like you're getting to the point where that conversation may at least be being considered.
Yeah, and in the past, it's been like, well, you don't want to make a move because you could lose the defensive line class. And right now, you don't have enough guys necessarily in the class to really concern yourself about losing them. Obviously, you've got guys committed that you want to keep, Edric Houston, Eric Mensah, guys like that. But you can't let the fear of what could happen continue to alter or affect your decision-making in what is happening. Because stuff is happening as we speak in terms of the defensive line, production, development, all of these things. And at some point, it's an inevitability. At some point, something needs to be done. So do you do it now? Do you do it later? And this all maybe also depends on what happens with Jim Knowles, which we'll get to in a bit. But so in terms of this losing Justin Scott, what does it do? What do they do now? They've got 3-star Carlin Jones visiting on December 8th, was committed to Nebraska, decommitted from there. And, so he's visiting and people feel pretty confident that he's going to end up there. You've got Amaris Williams, who is committed to Miami, who is a flip candidate at this point, but just waiting for that to happen. He is I'm just scrolling through here looking for him. Number 11 defensive lineman in the class, number 46 overall out of North Carolina. He's listed at 6'3", 270. So is he a 3-4 end? Is he a defensive tackle? Stuff like that needs to be figured out. But again, you need bodies. And of course there is the portal. They just offered Middle Tennessee graduate transfer Marley Cook, who grad transfers can announce they're transferring and announce their offers at this point. They don't need to wait till Monday. They can do what they want. They've got enough book learning in them. They've studied, they've earned their degrees. They don't need to wait around like kids. So with the portal, Tom, you also don't need to necessarily worry about losing a class, because you can kind of make up for it and grab some guys who have experience. I just don't think you can continue to, and I don't know if they have been, but coach scared in terms of your coaches, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have to take, I think, a little bit of a long view on some of this stuff. And, if you were going to make a change, you don't have a huge class this year that you're super worried about losing. And I think part of the question also is, who would you bring in as a replacement? And can you bring in someone who would be a draw as well? I don't think this is, Ryan Day has done a lot of internal hiring and internal promotions. I don't think this is an internal promotion position. I think you got to go out and get a name, get someone with a reputation, and bring someone in who, is sort of established and is not just, an internal guy who you don't want to lose. I think that's not a great way to make decisions on a, repeated basis. Amaris Williams, the Florida commit, he's a top 50 guy. He's someone who they could, that would be a real significant addition. And Edric Houston is kind of the same way, where he's, he's not a 230 pound, 240 pound guy. Those are Amaris Williams, 6'3", 270. Edric Houston, I think, is somewhere in that like 270, 275 kind of range. Those are bigger defensive ends. And that's something that would be a little bit out of the ordinary for Larry Johnson. So we'll see, if they end up, Houston sounds like he's going to end up as an edge. Amaris Williams, like you said, could be an edge, could maybe be a 3-tech, something like that. But, and Marley Cook from Middle Tennessee, as you said, is a possibility as well. He has not put up huge numbers at Middle Tennessee, so that might be more of a depth play than anything else. But you can sort of patch holes through the portal, and that's something that you've seen good teams do that. You can't build through the portal. You do need to still hit on your recruiting, because the portal play a lot of times is a 1 or 2 year thing, and that's fine if you're bringing in a guy to fill a spot. Josh Simmons this year, great. That worked out really well for Ohio State at left tackle. You can't just build an offensive line through the portal. That's what it sounds like Deion Sanders is kind of trying to do at Colorado. And I was reading something that basically there are maybe 30 Power 5 caliber offensive linemen in the portal during any given year. And there are 60-something Power 5 teams, and they probably all would love to add one. So on average, you're going to add about half of one every year. So you can't just, and that's probably true of defensive tackle. That's probably true of edges as well. I'm sure that's true of quarterbacks. There are just not, the demand significantly outstrips the supply there. So you've got to be able to continue to bring guys in from the high school ranks and continue filling, keep that pipeline full, because it is not that easy to just we'll plug a hole. Maybe you can plug one hole. You're not going to plug 3.
Well, and when you are doing what Deion Sanders is doing and trying to basically rebuild your offensive line every year or whatever, you're not going to get the first 5 draft picks in the offensive line class of the portal. And I know one former Buckeye was offered $5,000 to go to Colorado, and it's why? There are other places to go that are more collegial. I don't know, just it feels more like college football, and there's more chance to win. And really, if they could have put frozen time after about the first 3 weeks of the season, then everybody's going to be talking about Colorado. But when I think they lose 8 of 9, and you see at least one player lashing out about the selfish nature of the team, that's something that we have talked about for a long time, that you can't build a championship through NIL. You have to build it with culture. Now you supplement it. You can build upon it, but you can't, the foundation can't be transfer portal and NIL, because it's you're building the foundation on a foundation of sand, as they say, and it's not going to hold up to any kind of adversity, scrutiny, windy day type of stuff. And I think you're seeing that.
It does get windy in College Station, Texas, if that is any kind of indication. And, you go back through the recruiting class that they had a couple of years ago, and, the games are won and lost along the offensive and defensive lines. Absolutely. 100% true. Texas A&M brought in one of the greatest defensive line classes in the history of the sport and just fired their coach. 2 years after bringing in one of the greatest defensive line, you've got the most expensive coach in the history of the sport. You've got the most expensive recruiting class in the history of the sport, and you fire your coach. And, there's a lot of the stuff happening that has happened at Texas A&M in the last couple of years is a lot of the same stuff that you see happening at places like Miami, where it's you kind of have to, culture is one of those things that everyone talks about, and it's not really something that everyone has built. And even the places that you think you've built it, sometimes it isn't quite as strong as you think it is. It's one of those things that I think people roll their eyes at, but it is something that kind of matters. And, in the wake of Ohio State's loss to Michigan, I think you have a lot of people examining the culture at Ohio State, and is the culture at Ohio State exactly what they say it is, and all that kind of stuff. And, are you having that same conversation if they complete one more pass? What does that one more pass do for the culture at Ohio State if Marvin Harrison catches it instead of Rod Moore? And, that's, I think there's a big gap between, put it this way. I think there's a much bigger gap between Ohio State and Texas A&M, or Ohio State and Miami, than there is between Ohio State and Michigan, or Ohio State and Georgia, or whoever else you'd want to compare that to.
Completely agree. And last thing, Tom, before we get out of here, reports on Wednesday from, I believe, Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic, saying that Jim Knowles has spoken with Duke about their open head coaching position. this is year 2 of a 3-year contract with Jim Knowles. And I guess on the one hand, you want your coordinators to be looked at as possible head coaches, future head coaches, things like that. And if you go and talk to a school, clearly you are interested in that job. I don't I don't necessarily think that he's leaving or that he would be the choice. He has been an assistant there for almost a decade, so he understands the culture and what it takes and what you can and can't do there. And I think Duke likes that aspect of the reality, the knowledge of the reality. Um, and obviously, what Jim Knowles has done at Ohio State this year has been very good. Number 2 scoring defense, number 3 total defense, number 3 or 4 or 5 pass efficiency defense. So, I think it's obviously something to monitor. Until I hear more, though, I expect him. Well, I expect him back. I expect Duke to maybe go in a different direction until we hear something more that this is heating up. But just to know that he's looking around when you kind of figured he would be around for as long as you wanted him. I wonder what Ryan Day's reaction to this is, or if this is also Ryan Day saying, "Hey, go look around."
Well, I don't know that he's getting chased out. This might be a little bit like when Brian Hartline had his name in with, what was it, the Cincinnati job last year or something like that, where he was at least in sort of theoretically. It may be a go ahead and take a look. And if you want to be a head coach at some point, okay, take a look and see what you want to do. Knowles coached at his alma mater, Cornell, from 2004 through 2009 and had one season above 500. And hasn't been a head coach since 2009. So I'm not expecting him to be the one who gets the job at Duke. I know Manny Diaz was one of the other names that was in there, and Manny Diaz has been a head coach more recently and not tremendously successful as a head coach. He was circling back to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
The Manny Diaz era at Miami was not a disaster, but it wasn't a huge success either. So now you're going to go work at Duke and have less resources and be in the same conference, maybe okay. And Manny Diaz is a lot like Jim Knowles, where he had a very good defense this year in the Big Ten East and played pretty well, but is in a spot where the fan base is probably not thrilled because they lost the wrong games. And so, I think those guys are probably fairly similar. Knowles is in his late 50s. I think Diaz is in his maybe late 40s, something like that. So, similar kinds of profiles, but we'll see where this one goes. But, Knowles with the connection there, it's worth poking around if that's something you think you want to maybe do again at some point.
Tom, I'm going to throw a number out at you. The over/under on coaching staff changes for Ohio State this year. We should go back and look at what we said last year, because I'm almost certain we did this last year as well, and we've probably done it every year. But if I set the over/under in terms of the number of changes of the top of the 10 assistant coaches, Tom, I am going to set that number at 2.5.
See, I was thinking you were going to say 1.5, because I think 1 is almost certain. Mm-hmm. And then, I think I could get to 2, and 3 is probably someone leaving who you're not expecting to leave. I'm going to take the under on that. I think 2 would be, if I'm just laying out, the order of probability, 2 is probably the most likely scenario to me, followed maybe by 1 and then 3 and then 0. But I don't have a super high degree of confidence here, because you could have one guy get a head coaching job. And like Kevin Wilson got a head coaching job last year and took a bunch of lower level staffers to Tulsa with him. So, if someone gets a Power 5 gig, did they take, a position coach with them to go be a coordinator? Maybe.
Well, and that's why setting the number at 1.5 is a pretty easy over for me. A more easy over than what the 2.5 would be, whether you want to go under or over that. At this point, I would probably, this is why I asked you so I wouldn't have to do it. I think this early on, maybe you just go over just because it might be a better bet in terms of the payout if we're talking actual dollars. Not that I'm expecting any particular person, but shoot, maybe a position coach gets an opportunity to go be a DC somewhere because again, this has been a very good defense. It's been a very good secondary. You've got 2 secondary coaches. Is this something where one of them gets an opportunity? Something like that. I think there's going to be, we would both agree there's going to be at least one and quite possibly 2. The question is there going to be a third? And that's one thing we'll be watching all December long, maybe into January as well. And coaching changes. It's a part of the game, happens every year. And the speculation will never stop. And we'll try to keep up on all of that, the possibilities and the probabilities throughout. Tom, you got anything else?
No, I think we're good for now. And then who knows, maybe between transfers and the bowl drama over the weekend and conference championship games and coaching changes, I suspect there will be plenty of stuff for us to talk about starting next week.
Yeah, and daily previews of Louisville versus Ohio State in the Orange Bowl.
Maybe. Maybe.
Let's not start getting grumbly just yet. There's plenty of time, so that will do it. If you are watching this video on YouTube, please go ahead and like it. I should have said that earlier. That's my fault. I apologize for that. Also, please find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. If you're not yet a member, now is a great time. Trust me, it's still a good time to become a member. You can find us there. It is also a great way to support what we do. So we want to thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.